Hello everybody, my name is Nootmad and welcome back to another Borderlands 3 Moze build. So today we are going over my Sharpshooter Moze build, which as you can tell by the title, is a sniper centric Moze build. Now for all you Moze players out there looking for a sniper build, look no further. This build is incredibly powerful and honestly a ton of fun. I've been playing this build a lot on and off stream as well, and yeah, as you can see in the gameplay in the background, this build absolutely crushes any enemy, anointed or non anointed enemies alike. And just a couple of notes about this build in particular. It rolls around the Overkill Guardian perk, which is obviously one of the Guardian perk skills as I just said, and is basically what it does is converts any overkill damage that you do to an enemy and adds it to your next shot. So for example, if I dealt 15 million damage to an enemy with only 5 million health, 10 million of that damage is counted as overkill damage and will be added to my next shot. So for example, if my next shot was supposed to be doing 15 million again, it'll add the 10 million and I'll be doing 25 million damage. Now mathematically that's not exactly how it works, but just as a general example of its function, that's basically how it works. But don't think that just because you don't have the Guardian perk for overkill that this build's not going to work. At the end of the day, you are using a really powerful splash sniper, which is the Headsplosion, and the Blastmaster class mod. Those two combined is this really reliable weapon in general. But with the overkill Guardian perk thrown into the mix, this build just becomes incredibly powerful. And yeah, I guess without any further ado, let's just go straight into seeing what makes this build click. Alrighty, so let's kick this video off with the weapons that we're choosing for our Sharpshooter Moze build. And so as you can tell by the title, it's called Sharpshooter Moze, so we're going to be using snipers. And the first sniper that I'd recommend is the Headsplosion with the 390 weapon anoint. Now the Headsplosion was buffed recently and is now even more reliable than it was. So yeah, definitely a very solid sniper now, really high damage, good splash, and it also ricochets on crits, much like a typical Jacobs does, but it splits into 3, so if you get a good overkill shot with splash, you can very easily wipe mobs. And if you're watching the gameplay right now, you can see occasionally I wipe groups of enemies with a single shot, just because of the way it interacts with splash and the ricochets as well. Now the other weapon I recommend is the Ion Cannon. Now I know it's not a sniper, but it might as well be. It has really high base damage, and it's just a really accurate rocket launch to use. So for example, if you go down to fight for your life and you're fighting an enemy that just won't die from your explosion shots, just whip a Ion Cannon, ruin their day, get your second win, and continue on as normal. Now the anoint I'd recommend for this is the 390 anoint, and the elements is basically just match it to whatever enemies you're fighting. I prefer the radiation anoint, it's a good all-rounder element to have, and it helps with the radiation explosions to chain to other enemies and create this sort of blood explosion effect that I always mention in my other build videos. So yeah, those are the two weapons I recommend. However, the Skull Masher sniper rifle is also decent, with the 390 anoint especially, but if I was to pick a single sniper for this build, it would be the Headsplosion, so I highly recommend that. Now that's the weapons out of the way, nice and quick. Then we have it to shields. I'm using a version 0.m shield. It's the strongest amp shield in the game for single pellet weapons, like the Headsplosion and the Ion Cannon. So that's why I'm using that. And the anoint doesn't really matter. We're not using Iron Bear at all, so I just have a bonus element. But you can just as easily use the Iron Bear cooldown anoint, for example, or anything else. But yeah, the main point is to just use the version 0.m shield, just because it'll amp most of your shots. Now you won't always be at full shield capacity, which is fine, because the Headsplosion has the damage to back it up without the amp damage if it doesn't happen. But when you do get those amp shots, the damage is absurd, so that's why I'd use it. So moving on from that, we have our class mod, and we are using the Blastmaster class mod. Now because the Headsplosion does splash, it benefits from the Blastmaster class mod, and that's why I'd recommend it. As far as the skills go, I would have 3 in Vampire, 1 in Holy Pin, and 1 in Redistribution. Having that 2 out of 1 in Redistribution helps a lot with the ammo regeneration. Because we don't have Forge on this build, our only ammo regen is through Means of Destruction and Redistribution. So being able to boost that helps a lot to maintain our ammo capacity, and therefore maintaining a Blastmaster splash damage bonus. And Vampire is just there to help us stay alive. The substats that you want on this class mod is basically those little buff sniper rifles. So for example, Jacob's critical damage, splash damage, and sniper damage are all really useful substats to have, and that's what I would recommend. The grenade that I would recommend is the Mervtacular Hex. just because it does the radiation damage over time, which means if you have a lot of enemies that are irradiated and you kill one of them, they will explode, spread to other enemies with that overkill damage, creating that blood explosion effect and that group wiping ability. So yeah, that's why I'd recommend the Moze Hex for this build. And the relic is the Snowdrift Victory Rush. Now, Snowdrift is there to help with mobility. Victory Rush gives us extra damage when we kill a badass. You get that extra multiplicative damage. The Pearl of Ineffable Knowledge is far from useful for this build, just because we're not, I guess, doing a constant stream of bullets, so it's not really that useful. That's why I use the Victory Rush. And once again, the stat rolls are those that will benefit your weapon. I prefer mag size and area of effect damage. Third stat can be whatever you want, so whether it be weapon damage, sniper damage. But yeah, that's the gear out of the way, and we'll move straight into the skills. Okay, and now we finally arrive on our skill tree setup for this build. So, we'll just start off with bottomless mags, and as you can see, it's nothing too fancy about it. We have Cloud of Lead and Redistribution to help us with the ammo economy. Being able to maintain that helps us keep our Blastmaster damage bonus at full cap, which means we'll be able to do a ton of splash damage, 100% to be exact. And so yeah, bear in mind we also have a Blastmaster class 1 boosting our Redistribution, so with 2 out of 1 we get 10% ammo regen for every crit we get. And it only makes sense because with this build, it's a sniper build, so obviously you're going to be going for a lot of crits. So having that extra point redistribution at 2 out of 1 really makes this build work quite nicely with Blastmaster and synergizes really well. We have Stoke the Embers only because we have Experiment Munitions and Fire in the Skagden, so being able to boost that instant damage makes sense and helps quite a lot. Scrappy gives us extra gun damage while moving, and because we're always going to be jumping around, running side to side, and do all those sorts of things, Scrappy just gives us a nice little damage bonus to play with. We also have Scorching RPMs. This gives us extra crit damage. Once again, this build is mostly focused around getting crits, so being able to boost that damage just makes sense. Special Spare is pretty much only there just because we don't really have the better place to put the points in. You can put in Iron Bank, you can put in Darker Bear, but realistically they're not really that useful. Special Spare is a nice single point sink, and it just helps us get a stronger Iron Bear at the end of the day, because we are using a Blastmaster, so you can do a bit of a hybrid setup with that. So yeah, that's why I put it in there. Demolition Woman skill tree, by now, if you guys seen most of my builds, my Demolition Woman spec is more or less always the same, but just a few things to point out. We have Grizzle just to help us get Iron Bear back faster. Fire in the Skagden is Fire in the Skagden, gives us a crazy amount of instant damage on splash. Because the head explosion does splash, it just makes sense to have it to guarantee those kills, as well as get the damage over time to, I guess, maintain certain annoyance. Means of Destruction helps with not only the ammo regen, but also grenade regen as well. And because we're chucking out a lot of hexes to do those radiation explosions or / blood explosions, whatever you want to call it, it just helps quite a lot. TCP is just there to increase our splash damage mostly. And Order Bearer is always nice to have because he can slag enemies on the field with target softening, so it just makes sense to have that. And yeah, nothing else too stand out about it. And I guess we just move on to Shield Retribution, and once again, nothing too fancy. We have Drowning and Brass just to give us extra gun damage. After 3 kills, it's 60% gun damage. It's very easy to maintain, very easy to max out. And yeah, just a highly recommended skill whenever you go into the Shield Retribution tree. And we have Experimental Munitions. And because, once again, this is a sniper build, we're going for crits, it only makes sense to be able to have free instant damage on your critical hits. So yeah, that's it for the skill tree. And with that, rounds up basically the video. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. I've had a lot of fun playing around with this build. Hope you guys take a lot out of it. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. But yeah, that's about it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya!